Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation. Today we've got a great one. We're going to dive into the fascinating intersection of cutting edge technology, medical innovation, and environmental sustainability. Our guest has an impressive track record as a tech visionary, entrepreneur, and leader in both healthcare robotics and green tech. I'm thrilled to welcome Dave Saunders, a pioneering innovator whose career spans from the early internet era to the modern advancements in surgical robotics and decarbonization technology. As Chief Technology Officer at Circumvent Global, Dave focuses on developing solutions that address critical environmental challenges, while his experience at Galen Robotics revolutionized surgical precision and outcomes. His journey through tech innovation is both inspiring and insightful. Dave, I'm really looking forward to this. The surgical robots always makes me think of Star Wars, and the decarbonization, I think, is something that's just super important for our future in general. So I think we've got a lot to talk about. Thanks for the time. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you.
Maybe to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the decarbonization field.
Yeah, sure. It's been a fun journey, a little bit of a weird path at times. I started out in the early internet industry before the internet was public. My company was the first commercial developer of internet software to connect Macs and PCs to the internet. Our customers were all defense contractors building, in fact, the 767, a bunch of weapons probably. And it was just a lot of fun for me because I'm kind of one of those nerds that just loves to get his fingers into things. I wrote a mini textbook on internet protocols and won a technical writing award for that. And I was also really deeply involved in some of the early protocol development for the internet. And as that kind of continued on, I ended up at a company, Ascend Communications. As the internet went public, dial-up was a thing, and we literally sold 1 billion modems worth of access concentration devices. So those are the devices at the ISP that was answering the phone when you dialed up to the internet. And really learned about just like not only the technical challenges, but how to deal with a manufacturing organization and building. I mean, how do you build 1 billion modems worth of a device that has 672 modems inside of it? It's this tall on the rack. And how does that work? All that to go together. And how do you manage organizations dealing with that? That went on to Lucent Bell Labs. We were acquired, and that group that I ran there, one of our projects was we invented the first commercial. We didn't know that Wi-Fi was going to be a word yet. We were still calling it wireless Ethernet.
Yeah,
But the little spaceship Wi-Fi hotspot that was sold by Apple in the very beginning when the new iMac was launched, that was my group. If you crack open the plastic, it says Lucent Orinoco. It's a little PCM CAA card, and we
nice.
cranked that out in about 6 months,
Wow.
just in time for the iMac launch, and we had it ready for shipping for Apple. And that fell into, I just, tech is tech. I love just, how do we take technology and apply it in meaningful ways for the customers? And so that kind of led into med tech. And I've worked on 2 different technology transfer projects, taking basically surgical robotic technology out of university research and commercializing that. And most recently, that was a microsurgical robot developed by Professor Russell Taylor at Johns Hopkins University. He's the father of surgical robotics. Basically every robot on the market, surgical robot on the market, kind of all paths lead back to Russ. And that was just an amazing piece of technology. Just again, learning about the nuts and literally the nuts and bolts of bringing technology like that together and doing something that's meaningful for a surgeon. Actually helping them do their job better, or helping surgeons that are like right on the bubble for having like magical dexterity hands, and they know everything, they've got complete training, but how can we just get them over that bubble so that we have more surgeons that can do difficult, minimally invasive procedures? Really, really cool stuff. And then most recently, just because of a lot of the folks I know in DC, I was asked to take a look at some technology for basically decarbonization efforts. And so I'm working with some Fortune 10 companies on basically incorporating decarbonization technologies. There's, a lot of emphasis on trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's not just CO2. There's a bunch of other greenhouse gases that are even more potent than CO2. And the challenge there, I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the challenge there is how do we incentivize companies to want to do this? Because if it's just an added expense, unfortunately, a lot of folks are like, I don't care, I'm not going to do it. So how do we make that kind of technology meaningful to a business, and how do we convey these kinds of techs in a way that could be financially lucrative to actually adopt these technologies? So it's really fun to understand how to deal with these obviously very diverse markets, and yet there's a lot of similarities when you're dealing with these different kind of markets as well, in terms of really interfacing with the customer and building something meaningful for them.
And I love the way you frame that. Like, just it is a diverse set of solutions with maybe some common foundations that aren't necessarily apparent from the outside. When you're looking at all this, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you're looking for that helps you kind of stay ahead of the industry trends and keeps you from kind of getting bogged down in a single thing or falling behind?
Yeah, it's really it's tough when you're a nerd, because you really fall in love with some of the technology at times, right? And I'm one of those people that and I'm just going to use the metaphors just because I love nerds of all flavors, but I'm not one of the basement dweller nerds. I'm one that can actually go out there and talk to people, and then I come back and I tell I tell the basement dwellers what to build. Right? There's something for everybody, and I think what's really important is getting out in front of those potential customers and really getting past the features. It's so easy. Seth Godin used to say it really well, in terms of, like, when you go to the hardware store and buy a drill and a drill bit to hang a picture, you don't want the drill and the drill bit. Ultimately, what you want is that satisfaction of seeing this beautiful painting that you bought hanging on the wall the way you want it to. That's ultimately what you want. Finding those keystones for the customers and really understanding what's meaningful to them, that becomes your North Star. And the technology and all the little bits and bytes, those are the things that ultimately feed into that final moment of satisfaction, going, this product does what I need it to do. And that's a great feeling. And to be able to then also be embroiled in all the fun new tech, and really being able to sift through all those bits and bytes as though they're Lego blocks, and go, this is what this is what the customer wants, and really being able to put that together in a meaningful way. That's, I think, having that North Star first and foremost. I think that's what really makes sure that you're always heading in the right direction, which is what your customer wants to experience and what they want to feel.
So what I kind of hear you saying is, if you want to play with the technology, you either have to understand the customer need, the customer job to be done yourself,
Yeah.
or you have to find someone who does, who can help translate for you.
Yep, that's right. And just to give you a quick example, when I was talking to different technology transfer offices at universities about potential medical device technologies or things to integrate into surgical robotics, I had a really simple 3-bullet item sorting algorithm, effectively. And what I wanted was something that was based on a current medical device. So I'm not looking for anything radical. I want to see something that's innovating, something that's already out there, right? Secondly, I want it to be based on current best medical practices. I don't want to go out there and invent a new surgical technique, because that means I've got to convince surgeons to do things a different way. I've got to convince the FDA that it's safe. And then finally, I want it to be easy to explain. If I can imagine myself in a room filled with high school students, and I can explain why this piece of technology is actually cool and obvious in terms of its benefit, I know I've got something.
Yeah.
And so really having some kind of, there's a lot of tech out there, and just being able to have your own little bullet list of, this is what gets me going. And so this is going to be my sorting algorithm to get through all of the tech out there and find what's really going to go in there in the tech. There's going to be some people who want the radical stuff. They want the things that are just complete moonshots, and that's great too. But understand what your sorting criteria is, so that you can work through all of the noise and find the signal you're looking for, right?
So how did that viewpoint, that methodology take you to Circumvent? And talk to me a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so it's a very similar situation where For example, one of the customers that I'm working with is a food producer, and a lot of their products involve basically milk. So, how many dairy cows are we talking about? Well, this one customer has 200,000 dairy cows.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Now, we start doing some research and we realize that just because of their natural biology, a cow actually belches about 100 kilograms, so that's about 220, 240 pounds of methane into the atmosphere. Methane is 86 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So this is a pretty significant issue all by itself. And then you've got the other waste products from the cows, and all of those as they break down produce methane. So, oh, let's dry it out and burn it. Oh, well, burning it's going to produce
More
CO2.
methane. Right.
So
Yeah.
what can we do to really not only identify and reduce these different carbon inventories as they're called, um, but is there a potential value for them? And so that's been really interesting. And so we've been looking at different applications of waste to energy technologies around gasification, which is different than burning. And from that, we can actually produce usable energy. And then, okay, what do we do with that energy? Well, it turns out that these big dairy farms are typically running milk condensers on the farm, so that there's less water content, which means less gas to truck the milk products to wherever they need to go. Those use a lot of energy right there.
Right.
In fact, one of the farms that I'm talking to uses about 400,000 therms of energy. And if you look at your own energy bill for your home, I've got like gas heat and gas for my dryer, and I use about 1,200 therms a year
Oh,
just to run my house. So 420,000 therms of energy just to dry the milk to reduce the amount of water in it. Well, if we take all the manure and we take all the waste products that are produced on a farm from a day-to-day basis, it looks like there's a potential of actually using a gasifier, we could potentially take that energy from all those waste products and actually use that to run the condensers. So now we've got a bit of a circular economy. We've reduced the amount of natural gas that we have to expend, and yet we're still getting the same outputs, we're getting the same benefits. So that's pretty cool. And what's really fun about working with farmers too is they care about what they're using. I mean, they may not look at it in terms of the same, tree hugging, carbon reduction, stuff like that. There's a different way to present a message to everybody. They look at it in terms of efficiency. They care about their water. When they're rinsing down the barn every day to get all the manure away from the
yeah.
cows, they're recycling that gray water, because why flush it down the drain and send it off to the sewers,
Right.
right? And so they're cognizant of these things, and they're really thinking about like their energy consumption as these are dollars that I'm putting in to produce milk,
Absolutely.
which I then charge money for, right? So farmers really think about those pennies, and they really think about where those efficiencies come from. So even though from a kind of a there's some people that might look at these kind of technologies as, climate change prevention and stuff like that. But these customers are looking at in terms of, I'm finding new efficiencies on my farm, and they just happen to also reduce carbon emissions.
Right.
Okay, great. Lots of
Even
people are
better.
happy because of that.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I mean, it's rare that you can actually change someone's mind, but I think it's a lot more common that you can find common ground to work from. And
That's
and
right.
that's what you're doing, which I love that. I am curious though, given what you're talking about, what are the hurdles that are left? What are the things that you still have getting in your way?
Yeah. Well, partly these technologies are expensive upfront to build. If you've got some of these numbers really blow my mind. If you've got a, say, 10,000 to 15,000 cow farm, which is a lot of cows, they're producing somewhere around 250 tons of usable waste a day.
Day.
A day. So now imagine the kind of system that I would need to find room on their farm to build and then operate, that's going to turn all of that waste, 250 tons of waste a day, into energy. I'm building a small reactor on that farm.
Right. Yeah.
And so what's the sweet spot that I can build today? I mean, it's you got to find where that sweet spot is economically and technologically. And then once it's installed, then let's see if we can dial it back and make it, usable and economical for 100 cow farm or 1,000 cow farm. And so, fortunately, we've stumbled in on a sweet spot in terms of large scale dairy farms, but there's a lot of dairy farms out there that are a lot smaller, and they could certainly benefit from these kinds of technologies as well. Right now, that would be tough to build. And so it's, and we see this in all kinds of technologies. I mean, whoever thought that I'd be carrying around 1 billion transistors on my wrist?
Right.
When I grew up, Radio Shack literally sold a transistor radio, and on the
Yeah.
front of the box it said 9 transistors. 9 transistors in a radio, and now it's like
Yeah.
9 transistors.
Whatever. I like to call this my tricorder.
Oh yeah, it's just it's amazing. But it all started out as huge. In fact, when I worked at Lucent, their original, the first ever transistor is still in a museum in New Jersey. It's in a
Wow.
big argon case, and the two of the input gates, they're the size of Coke cans.
Yeah.
That was the first transistor.
That's
So
awesome.
you have to start somewhere. You gotta find that sweet spot. You gotta find what works, and then learn from what works, and then go whatever direction. Scale it up, scale it down, whatever you then need to do.
So, Dave, as we head into the time for wrap up, I'm curious, what is the lesson that you've learned, the valuable message you have that would be best to share with our listeners today?
Get out in front of those customers. Find people to talk to, and if you have to buy them a beer to really get at the heart of the conversation, then that's what you got to do. But you have to get past the PowerPoint unicorn decks and all that kind of stuff, and really have conversations with your potential customers and find out what it is they're really trying to solve. And the moment they start talking about features, you're not solving problems. Get past that in the conversation. Take notes for the features, sure, but you really, really want to establish that North Star for what you're ultimately building, because what you are probably uncovering at that moment is going to cover 5 or 6 potential new market segments that you could be addressing in terms of sizes or different configurations. And so those kinds of validations, those kinds of customer conversations, there's no way to oversell the need for doing that and really getting in front of those people and validating what it is that you're ultimately trying to build.
I love it. Well, Dave, thank you so much for the time today. This has been a lot of fun. I am geeking out over all the technology. It's been great. For everyone who's been listening all the way to the end, I want to thank you as well. And I want to encourage you in the comments, maybe talk about your Star Wars, Star Trek moment when you saw the technology that really represented the future and kind of helped you geek out and relate. Let us know. We'd love to hear your story. And while you're doing that, leave a rating as well, because we'd really appreciate that. Maybe even more importantly, though, if you know someone that's in the green tech space that could be interested in hearing a little bit about what Circumvent Global is doing,